Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into something critical, the Dutch justice system and, well, why it seems so bogged down.
Yeah, what's causing all these delays? We're aiming to, cut through the headlines.
And we'll be drawing heavily on an interview with Rinus Ate. He's a top official at the Public Prosecution Service, the OM.
That's right. We've got clips from a YouTube interview where he's pretty candid, actually. He talks about the struggles, the bottlenecks.
And a potential solution they're pushing, this thing called strafbeschikking.
Exactly. We want to unpack what that is, what it means, and, well, if it can really fix things.
Okay, so Ate kicks things off by saying, look, these problems, they're not new.
Not at all. He stresses that the Dutch criminal justice system has had significant issues for decades. It's deep-rooted.
Sounds like a whole system thing, not just one part failing.
Definitely. He describes it almost like a domino effect. It starts, he argues, with the police being under enormous pressure.
Right, because they're doing more than just investigating crimes these days.
So much more. They're handling mental health incidents, security for events, maintaining public order. It all adds up.
Like those recent issues in Scheveningen with the youth riots, or the fat bikes in Amsterdam.
Precisely. Those seem maybe small, but they consume huge amounts of police time. Investigation, identifying people, reviewing footage. State Secretary Ken Roddy mentioned this too.
It's like they're being pulled in too many directions. Social work, security, and investigations.
And Adi's point is, well, they just can't do it all effectively at the same time. They're spread way too thin.
Which must put the squeeze on the next link in the chain, the OM, the prosecutors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If the police investigations are delayed or incomplete, the OM gets these cases later, and they have their own resource limits.
So they have to start picking and choosing, prioritizing.
That's the dilemma. They simply can't pursue every single case that comes through the door, which then leads to...
The court's getting backed up.
Exactly. Significant backlogs.
Yeah.
Serious cases just sitting there waiting for a hearing.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? There's the prison system, too.
Right. The final link. Not enough cells.
Seriously. Leading to early releases.
It seems so. Insufficient capacity means people might get out early, which obviously raises big questions.
The whole thing creates this huge delay. Ad has a phrase for it.
He does. Tragrecht is slechtrecht. Slow justice is bad justice. And he really emphasizes the human cost.
For everyone involved, I guess.
Yeah, victims waiting, witnesses trying to remember details years later, even suspects living under a cloud. It's damaging.
And on top of the sheer volume, the type of crime is changing too.
That's another big challenge Ott highlights. Traditional stuff like burglaries, he says, are actually down, which is good news, of course.
Right.
But online crime, cybercrime, that's exploded. He mentioned increases in the tens of percent.
And the system isn't really set up for that?
Not adequately, no. It's a totally different kind of investigation, often borderless, technically complex. There just isn't enough capacity or maybe expertise geared towards it yet.
Okay, so we have this complex web of problems. Police stretched, OM prioritizing, courts backlogged, prisons full, crime shifting online.
It's a perfect storm, in a way.
So what's the OM's big idea to tackle at least part of this strafbeschikking?
Right, the strafbeschikking. It's essentially a prosecutor's order, a tool they have.
Okay, break that down. What does it let them do?
It allows the Public Prosecution Service, the OM, to impose certain penalties directly without needing a full court trial. It's been law since about 2008, actually.
So bypass the judge for some cases?
In a sense, yes. The idea is to lighten the load on the judges so they can focus on the really serious, complex cases.
And it means faster resolution for the less severe stuff.
That's the goal, a quicker outcome than going through the whole court process.
What kind of penalties are we talking about? Can they send someone to jail with this?
No, that's the key limitation. Absolutely no prison sentences via a strafbeschikking.
Okay, so fines, community service, things like that.
Exactly. Fines, community service orders, maybe other conditions, but not imprisonment.
And Otte wants to use this more.
Yes, significantly more. He mentioned wanting to get back to the usage levels they saw around 2010. It seems the use dipped for a while.
Can you give us a feel for the types of cases this might apply to?
Well, the interviewer suggested things like simpler assault cases, maybe some burglaries, offenses where the maximum possible sentence is 6 years.
But not the most serious crimes.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Rape, murder, those are absolutely excluded. They always go to court.
Now, the interviewer said simpler cases, but Ott pushed back on that a bit, didn't he?
He did, and it's an important distinction. He stressed that calling something simple can be misleading.
How so?
Well, take domestic assault. Legally, it might be classed as simple assault, maybe a max sentence of 3 years. But Ott says, given the context, the sensitivity, the impact on the victim, those cases almost always need a judge. They wouldn't use a Strafbeschickung there.
I see. So it's not just the legal category.
No, context is crucial. He gave another example. Two kids steal some licorice. Technically, the law might allow for a 6-year maximum for that type of theft, believe it or not.
Wow, okay.
But in reality, a police judge would likely give a very minor penalty. And that, Ott suggests, is the kind of case where a Strafbeschickung from the OM makes sense. It matches what a judge would probably do anyway, but faster.
Okay, so it sounds potentially efficient for certain situations, but hasn't there been pushback? Not everyone's on board?
No, definitely not. There's quite a public disagreement, particularly with Henk Navas.
He's the head of the council for the judiciary, the judges' council.
That's right. And Navas has some serious concerns. He basically feels this increased use of Strafbeschickung undermines the judge's role.
His argument being that judgment should come from a judge, not a prosecutor.
Pretty much. He sees it as chipping away at the separation of powers, perhaps, and he's worried about the message it sends.
Especially for cases where jail is technically an option.
That's a key point for Navas. He argues thousands of cases where prison could be imposed won't result in that if handled by the OM this way. He finds that socially undesirable.
How does Ott respond to that? That sounds like a fundamental disagreement.
Ott acknowledges the tension, but he frames it differently. He suggests they both fundamentally want the same thing, a better justice system.
So seeing it as a shared goal, just different approaches?
Kind of. He sees Navas's concerns as legitimate, stemming from a commitment to justice. But on the prison sentence point specifically,
Yes.
Ott counters that the cases where they plan to use Strafbeschickung more are largely ones where, in his view, a judge probably wouldn't impose prison time anyway.
So he thinks Navas is overstating the risk of people avoiding jail time who otherwise would have gotten it.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
He talks about the increase being maybe a few percentage points a year, focusing on those less severe instances within the categories.
It really highlights that interconnectedness Ott keeps mentioning. Police, OM, judges, they all have a stake and different perspectives.
Absolutely. You can't change one part without affecting the others. Autry really hammers this home. A bottleneck in one area creates problems down the line.
He even brought up history, right? Saying this isn't the first time they've had capacity crises.
Yeah, he mentioned the 70s and 90s, times when thousands of prison sentences just weren't carried out because there physically wasn't space. It's a recurring theme, it seems.
And responsibility for executing sentences has shifted over time, too.
It has. Used to be more directly under a government minister. Now the structures are different. But the core issue of capacity remains.
And it's critical now, too. You mentioned Skate Secretary Kenrady's warning.
Yes, about potentially closing thousands of prison cells, maybe 4,100 out of 9,000, due to budget issues. Ott clarifies that's not his direct area.
But it obviously impacts the whole system he's part of.
Hugely. If sentences can't be served or are drastically delayed, what does that do to the rule of law? To public confidence? It's deeply problematic.
It really feels like a system under immense strain from multiple angles.
It does. And Ott seems to suggest that assigning blame isn't helpful.
What's needed instead?
Better cooperation, more efficiency within the existing structures. He even touches on Parliament's role.
How so?
Well, sometimes the desire to legislate, to respond to societal demands, can lead to laws that are complex or just difficult to implement with the resources available, like creating new offenses without ensuring there's capacity to prosecute or, well, prison cells.
An overload, almost.
Perhaps a potential mismatch between legislative ambition and operational reality.
So looking ahead, what's Ott's prescription? What's the path forward from his perspective?
He stresses it's about continued effort, collaboration, respecting each institution's role, but finding ways to work together better.
And internally, within the OM.
Focusing on simplifying their own processes, how they register cases, document decisions, making things internally more efficient to handle the volume.
Because the ultimate goal is
Reducing waiting lists, getting outcomes faster, serving that public sense of justice, even if it's not always a full trial for every single case.
And he really wants people to see the Strafbeschickung not as some kind of justice light.
Absolutely not. He insists it's a legitimate full penalty, a proper legal instrument designed to uphold the law, just administered differently for certain types of cases.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive today, it's clear the Dutch justice system is facing, well, a raft of serious challenges.
Yeah, you've got the police stretched thin, prosecutors forced to make tough choices, courts with major backlogs, and real questions about prison capacity. It all adds up to delays.
Justice delayed, as Otta said. And a key proposed solution, or at least part of one, is ramping up the use of this strafbeschicking.
The prosecutor's order, a tool to try and spy things up for less complex cases, takes some pressure off the judges.
But it's controversial. The debate between the OM and the judiciary, with figures like Hank Navis voicing strong concerns, really shows how difficult reforming such a complex system is.
It absolutely does. There are fundamental principles at stake alongside the practical need for efficiency.
Which leaves you, the listener, with something to think about. Where is the right balance? How do we weigh efficiency against due process?
And what does all this mean for public trust? If cases are handled faster via a prosecutor, is that better or worse than waiting years for a judge? What are the potential long-term effects of these pressures and these proposed fixes on how justice actually works and feels in society?
Definitely a lot to mull over.